When you've spent most of your life on a stage, silence can feel like a punishment. I'm Elaine Dwart, and at 80, I've learned how quiet a house can become when the applause fades and there's no one left in the audience. My husband, Hector, passed 7 years ago. I still sleep on my side of the bed, out of habit more than anything else. His piano, our piano, sits by the window in the living room, untouched but not forgotten. Some mornings I run my fingers across the keys, not to play, but just to feel something familiar. I still have my house here in La Jolla, just blocks from the ocean. It's old, full of creaks and drafts, but it's mine. Hector and I bought it when we were newly married, before his cancer, before the quiet. I keep it tidy. The garden still blooming and my easels always set up by the window. Watercolors now, since the arthritis keeps me from playing long. I found painting to be a gentler kind of expression. I talk to my son Marcus every Sunday. He's a theater director. Well, COVID shut down his last production and things haven't bounced back. Still, he calls like clockwork, always with that same half-tired, half-charming tone. I appreciate the effort. Last week, he told me Lucas, my grandson, was finishing his film degree. It's his senior project, Marcus said. He's so passionate about this, Mom. Just like you with your music. I felt proud. Silly, maybe, but proud. A few days later, Lucas called asking for help with equipment costs. I didn't hesitate. I wrote him a check for $8,500. If that's what keeps the dream alive, who am I to stand in the way? Sophia, my daughter-in-law, has been visiting more too. She brought lemon cake last time, complimented my painting, and gently joked that the house was way too big for one person. I laughed, but something about her tone stayed with me. Still, I feel lucky. They call, they visit, they care, or at least, that's what I believed. I may not be on a stage anymore, but I still know when something feels rehearsed. And lately, I've started to wonder if the lines they speak to me aren't meant for me at all. A few days after I sent Lucas the check, I was downtown picking up watercolor paper when I saw him across the street, laughing with friends, arms full of shopping bags. Not camera gear, not film supplies, designer stuff. The kind you buy when you're not worried about rent. He didn't see me, and maybe that was a blessing. That night, Marcus called again. Said the theater space he'd been eyeing for his new show had fallen through. It's just so hard these days, Mom. Art's dying without support. Makes you wonder what it's all for. His voice carried that same soft sadness, the kind that wrapped around my heart like a wool blanket. I told him I was proud of him anyway, that he still believed in something. A few days later, Sophia dropped by unannounced again. She brought scones this time and a Pinterest board full of ideas for what she called a multi-generational creative sanctuary. "You know, Elaine," she said, running her hand along the windowsill, "this house has so much character. Can you imagine what we could do here? Theater downstairs, film upstairs, maybe even piano lessons in the garden." I smiled tight. It's always just been home to me. "Oh, of course," she said, brushing my shoulder. "But don't you ever think it's a lot for just one person?" I nodded politely, but didn't answer. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing her voice, soft, coaxing, like a casting director trying to convince an actor to audition for a role they didn't ask for. The next morning, Marcus sent me a link to a simple estate planning article. No subject, no message, just the link. I stared at it for a long time. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to take from it. A suggestion? A warning? A gentle nudge off stage? And then came the group texts. Sophia suggesting I downsize. Lucas asking how much the house was worth. Just out of curiosity. Marcus offering to help streamline things if I was feeling overwhelmed. No one said anything directly, but the script was forming, line by line, and I wasn't writing any of it. I've acted in enough plays to know when I'm being cornered into a role. And this time, I wasn't sure if I wanted to be in this production at all. It was a Wednesday afternoon when Marcus called, off schedule. Normally, we spoke on Sundays, but that day he sounded upbeat, almost rehearsed. "Hey, Mom," he said, "how are you feeling?" We made small talk. My garden club, his latest project, Lucas's short film. He said they were planning a little dinner for Lucas's friends and asked if I'd like to come. Of course, I said, genuinely touched. What can I bring? Just yourself, he replied quickly. Then after a pause, he added, Actually, would you mind sending over about $500 to cover the space deposit? We're booking a small venue. Sophia's card hit the limit. Something didn't sit right, but I brushed it aside. Sure, dear. I'll take care of it. Thanks, Mom. Love you. Love you too. I reached for my teacup when I realized the line hadn't gone dead. There was a shuffle, footsteps, then laughter. Not mine. She bought it, Sophia's voice sharp as ever. Hook, line, and sinker, Marcus answered. She's so easy. Just say the word Lucas and she opens her wallet. My chest tightened. She's getting slower, too, he continued. I think she's ready. Just got to ease her into signing over the deed, play the family angle, then push the legacy stuff. What if she backs out? Lucas chimed in. She won't. We've softened her up for months. The guilt, the loneliness, it's all working. Dad said it best. She's a sitting duck. Silence on my end. I sat frozen, phone still pressed to my ear, my world shrinking with every word. She doesn't need all that space, Sophia added. We're the ones building something. That house should be ours. Give it a few more weeks, Marcus said. She'll sign, and if she doesn't, we'll go to Plan B, assisted living. She won't fight it. I ended the call with trembling hands. The room around me blurred, not because I was crying, but because the air had shifted. Everything I thought was true had cracked. The roles I thought we were playing weren't real. I wasn't the loved matriarch. I was the mark. And the worst part? They thought I'd never notice. They thought I'd quietly fade from the scene. They forgot. I've been on stage my whole life. And I know when a performance is fake. Before I continue with what happened next, I want to pause for just a moment. If this story is resonating with you, if you've ever been in a situation where you realize the people you trusted were using you, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. What city? What country? And if you've ever overheard something you weren't meant to hear, something that changed everything, share that too. Your story matters. Now let me tell you how I took back my life. I didn't call Marcus back. I didn't text Lucas. I didn't even confront Sophia. There was no point. They had delivered their lines. Now it was time I rewrote the script. The next morning, I called Clara, an old friend from my symphony days who now worked with a nonprofit legal group for aging artists. I need advice, I said, my voice low, and discretion. By lunch, I was sitting in her office across from Miriam, an estate attorney who wore sensible shoes and didn't waste words. I told her everything, the call, the money, the years of slow manipulation. Miriam didn't blink. First we move your assets, then we lock your accounts, then we rewrite your will. It felt surgical, cold, necessary. That afternoon I looked through old files and found something I hadn't seen in years. A letter Hector had written me the week before he died, folded neatly in the back of my jewelry box. You always saw beauty where others missed it, he wrote. Don't let anyone make you small. I read it twice, then again. Then I called the bank and began the process of transferring my checking and savings into a private trust with no co-signers, no shared access, no loopholes. A week later, I attended Lucas's film screening, just like they asked. I sat quietly in the back row, wrapped in a soft shawl, smiling when people greeted me. Lucas's short film was impressive. It was also, ironically, about betrayal. Projection, perhaps. Afterward, I lingered by the door and listened as Marcus chatted with a potential investor. We're building something big, he said, and we've got the space locked down. It's in my family, just a matter of paperwork. I said nothing. Let them keep talking. Let them believe I was still reading from their script. But inside, I was already gone. My home was on the market under a blind trust. I had an apartment lined up in an artist co-op across town, small, sunlit, quiet. And I wasn't afraid. For the first time in years, I wasn't playing someone's mother, someone's bank, someone's backup plan. I was stepping out of their story and into my own. The house sold faster than I expected. The agent said oceanfront properties always move quickly, especially when priced right. What she didn't know was how priceless it felt to me to finally let it go on my own terms. I didn't tell Marcus or Lucas or Sophia. I simply disappeared from their plans like a ghost walking off stage mid-scene, without a bow or explanation. The morning I moved, I stood in the empty living room one last time. The sun poured through the big front windows, lighting up the wood floor Hector had refinished by hand. I touched the wall beside the piano, whispered "thank you," and walked out without looking back. My new apartment wasn't big, just 2 rooms and a balcony, but it faced east, which meant I got sunlight every morning. There was space for my easel. A sturdy, upright piano stood in the corner, donated by another retired musician. It wasn't grand, but it was mine now. The funds from the sale, $1.1 million after taxes and fees, went straight into a private trust managed by Clara's legal group. No family names on it, no loopholes, just clear, quiet protection. I set aside a portion to establish the Dwart Creative Arts Grant, a fund that would help young, low-income artists pay for instruments, classes, or supplies without needing to charm, flatter, or manipulate anyone's grandmother. A week after I moved, I wrote Marcus one letter. Just one. "You've always been a brilliant storyteller, but you forgot one thing. The audience remembers who wrote the script. Elaine." I didn't hear back. Not that I expected to. Lucas sent a half-hearted email. Sophia texted something vague. I deleted both. I didn't need their apologies. I needed air. And out here on my balcony, coffee in hand, brush in the other, I had plenty of it. No more performances, no more explanations. I didn't walk away in anger. I walked away in clarity. They cast me in a role I never auditioned for. The aging matriarch too soft to say no. But I had lines of my own now, and this time, the stage was mine. 6 months passed. I woke each morning with light on my face and no one's voice in my ear telling me what I should do or who I should be. My days had rhythm again, not a calendar filled with obligations, but a quiet tempo. Painting in the mornings, playing piano for the senior center every Thursday, teaching art to 3rd graders at the elementary school down the street. Their joy was loud, messy, and real. I hadn't felt that in years. Milos, of all people, showed up at one of my Thursday recitals. I hadn't seen him since before everything fell apart. He'd moved into a nearby retirement complex, as it turned out, and still wore the same tweed cap and mischievous grin. "I heard the music," he said, "and followed the sound. I was hoping it was you." We shared coffee after. No expectations. Just memories and mutual understanding. We've kept meeting since, sometimes for lunch, sometimes just to sit in silence and look at the ocean. Marcus never responded to my letter. Sophia sent a forwarded legal notice, probably an attempt to fish for details about my estate, but my attorney handled it. I never saw their names on my phone again. Lucas emailed me once. The subject line said, "Sorry." I never opened it. I had nothing left to give them, not money, not answers, not access to the life I rebuilt with careful, loving hands. But I did leave the door cracked, not wide, just cracked enough for a change of heart to slip through, if it ever came. I painted a new piece last week, a watercolor of my old house bathed in soft golden light, not as a longing, just a memory, a set piece in a story I no longer lived in. Yesterday I played Clair de Lune in the garden behind my new home. A few neighbors gathered. Milos brought lemonade. The sky was pink with dusk and my fingers moved like they remembered joy again. I am 80 years old. I am no one's burden, no one's checkbook, no one's puppet on a string. I am Elaine Dwart, artist, teacher, survivor, and for the first time in my life, the curtain closed when I chose. You know what's strange about betrayal? It's not always loud. Sometimes it comes wrapped in kindness, delivered with a smile, disguised as concern. For years, I thought I was being a good mother, a supportive grandmother. I thought the checks I wrote, the doors I opened, the money I gave freely, that all of it was building something, a legacy, a bond, a family that would remember me fondly when I was gone. But I realize now I was building their comfort, not my connection. And the moment I became inconvenient, the moment my usefulness ran out, they were ready to move me off stage like a piece of old furniture. That phone call, the one I wasn't supposed to hear, it didn't just hurt me. It freed me. Because for the first time in decades, I saw clearly I wasn't their mother in that conversation. I wasn't their grandmother. I was a resource, a problem to be solved, an obstacle standing between them and what they believed they deserved. And you know what? That clarity, as painful as it was, became my strength. I think about Hector often, especially in the mornings when the light hits the piano just right. He would have been furious if he'd heard that call. But he also would have understood why I didn't scream, didn't rage, didn't burn bridges in a dramatic confrontation. Because he knew me. He knew I process things quietly, carefully, like arranging notes in a symphony. And he knew that the most powerful endings aren't always the loudest. The week after I moved, I started volunteering at a community center for seniors. Not as a performer, not as someone with a name or a past, just as Elaine. I taught watercolor painting on Tuesday mornings. Most of the students were women my age, some older, some widowed like me, some estranged from their own families. We didn't talk much about our lives. We just painted. But there was something deeply healing about sitting in that sunlit room, sharing silence and color with people who understood loss without needing to explain it. One woman, Dorothy, told me she hadn't picked up a brush in 40 years. Her daughter had convinced her she wasn't talented enough to pursue art, so she stopped. Just like that. Gave up something she loved because someone she trusted told her she wasn't good enough. I watched her that first morning, hesitant, shaky, scared to make a mistake. By the end of the class, she'd painted a simple vase of flowers, nothing fancy. But when she held it up, her whole face changed. "I forgot," she said quietly, "how good this feels." I smiled. "Then don't forget again." I think that's what they took from me, not just money or property, but the permission to feel good about my own choices. For so long, I measured my worth by how much I could give them, and when that wasn't enough, I gave more. I ignored the signs, the coldness masked as busy schedules, the gratitude that felt obligatory, the visits that only came when they needed something. I told myself it was normal, that this was what family looked like in modern times. Everyone's so busy, I'd think. Everyone's struggling. But the truth is, love doesn't make you feel like an ATM, and family shouldn't make you feel like you're auditioning for their approval every single day. I learned that the hard way, but I learned it, and now I teach it. Not with words, but with example. When my students ask me why I started painting so late in life, I tell them the truth. I didn't start late, I say. I just stopped letting other people decide when my life was supposed to be over. They nod, they understand, because so many of them are living the same story. Daughters who call only when they need money, sons who never visit unless it's convenient, grandchildren who don't even know their names. We sit together, these women and we paint our truths, and slowly, stroke by stroke, we reclaim the parts of ourselves we thought were lost. Last month, I got a letter from Lucas, not an email this time, an actual letter, handwritten, delivered to my attorney's office because he didn't have my new address. Clara called to ask if I wanted it forwarded. I said yes, not because I was ready to forgive, but because I was curious. The letter was short. Grandma, I know I don't deserve your time or your forgiveness. I know what we did was unforgivable. I've been thinking about it a lot, about you, about the kind of person I became. I'm not making excuses. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. Really sorry. And I hope one day you'll let me prove it. I read it twice. Then I folded it neatly and placed it in a drawer. I didn't respond. Not because I'm cruel, but because I'm careful now. Because words are easy. And I've heard beautiful words before. What I'm waiting for, if I ever wait at all, is action. Consistency. Proof that the person writing that letter isn't the same person who laughed at me behind my back. Maybe that day will come. Maybe it won't. Either way, I'm okay. Because my peace doesn't depend on their redemption anymore. It depends on me. And I've learned how to protect it. I've also learned something else. That letting go doesn't mean you stop loving someone. It just means you stop letting them hurt you. I still think about Marcus sometimes, about the little boy who used to sit at the piano with me, his small hands stumbling over the keys, determined to play Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star all by himself. I think about the teenager who wrote me letters from summer camp, full of jokes and drawings and I miss yous. I think about the young man who cried in my arms the night Hector died, who told me he didn't know how to live in a world without his dad. That Marcus, the one I raised, the one I loved, I don't know where he went. Maybe he's still in there somewhere. Maybe life hardened him. Maybe ambition twisted something good into something cold. I don't know. And honestly, I've stopped trying to figure it out, because the Marcus I loved wouldn't have done what he did. And the Marcus who did what he did isn't someone I recognize anymore. So I've let him go. Not with anger. Not with bitterness. Just with acceptance. He made his choices. And I've made mine. I've started saying no more often. Not rudely, not defensively, just clearly. When a distant cousin called asking for money for a business opportunity, I said no. When an old acquaintance suggested I co-sign a loan, I said no. When someone at church hinted that I should donate a large sum to a fundraiser I didn't believe in, I said no. And you know what? The world didn't end. People didn't hate me. Some were disappointed, sure. Some stopped calling. But that's okay. Because the people who stayed, the ones who respected my boundaries, those are the people worth keeping. And I've built a new family around that principle. Not a family of blood, but a family of choice. Clara, who checks on me every week. Miriam, who still sends me funny legal cartoons. Milos, who brings me wildflowers from his walks. Dorothy and the other women from my painting class, who've become my Tuesday morning ritual. The third graders I teach, who remind me every week that joy doesn't require permission. These are my people now, and they see me, really see me. Not as a bank account or a piece of property or a convenient solution to their problems, but as Elaine. Just Elaine. And that's enough. I've also started traveling. Small trips, nothing extravagant. I took a train up the coast to visit an art museum in San Francisco. I spent a weekend in Sedona, painting red rocks and wide skies. I even booked a week in New Orleans where I listened to jazz in tiny bars and ate beignets until I couldn't move. Hector and I always talked about traveling more, but we never did. There was always something. Work, family, money, health. There was always a reason to wait. But I'm not waiting anymore. Because 80 doesn't mean over. It just means I've earned the right to live on my own terms. And if that means spending my money on plane tickets and hotel rooms instead of bailing out people who don't respect me, so be it. I'd rather leave behind stories than regrets. And I'd rather be remembered as the woman who chose herself than the woman who let herself be used. Sometimes, late at night, I wonder if I should have confronted them. If I should have sat them down, played them the recording I could have made, demanded an explanation, an apology, something. But then I remember. I didn't need their apology to move forward. I didn't need their acknowledgement to know I was right. I didn't need their permission to protect myself. I just needed to act. And I did, quietly, decisively, completely. And that's more powerful than any confrontation could have been. Because now they have to live with what they did. Not in some dramatic courtroom scene or tearful family intervention, but in the quiet moments, when they drive past the house that's no longer mine, when they realize the money they were counting on is gone, when they understand that I'm not coming back. That's their consequence, and I don't need to be there to deliver it. The truth delivers itself. I think about legacy a lot these days, what I want to leave behind, and I've realized it's not the house, it's not the money, it's not even the art, it's the lesson, that it's never too late to choose yourself, that you don't owe anyone access to your peace, that love, real love, doesn't come with conditions or calculations, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away. That's what I want people to remember. Not that I was taken advantage of, but that I took my life back, that I refused to play the role they wrote for me, that I stepped off stage, into the light, and lived. Really lived, on my terms, with my rules, in my own story. And I'm still here, still painting, still playing, still teaching, still laughing with Milos over bad coffee and good memories, still waking up every morning in a home that's mine, bought with my choices, filled with my peace. I am 80 years old, and I've never felt more alive. There's something profound about starting over at 80. Most people assume your life is winding down at this age, that you're supposed to be settling, accepting, fading quietly into the background. But I've discovered something they don't tell you. 80 can be a beginning too, maybe even the most honest beginning you've ever had, because at 80, you've shed so many illusions. You've seen enough to know what matters and what doesn't. You've loved enough to recognize the difference between real affection and performance. And you've lost enough to understand that holding on to the wrong things is far more painful than letting them go. My apartment has become a sanctuary in ways that beautiful oceanfront house never was. Don't get me wrong, I love that house. Hector and I filled it with music and laughter and all the dreams we thought would last forever. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being ours and became theirs. Every room held an expectation, every corner a demand. I couldn't walk past the piano without thinking about the money Marcus needed. Couldn't sit in the garden without remembering Sophia's Pinterest boards and her barely concealed designs on my home. The house had become haunted, not by ghosts, but by the people who saw me as an obstacle rather than a person. This new place, small as it is, belongs only to me. No one else's fingerprints are on these walls. No one else's plans are lurking in these rooms. When I paint here, I paint because I want to, not because someone's about to walk in and comment on whether I'm being productive enough with my time. When I play piano here, I play the pieces I love, not the ones that might impress someone. When I wake up here, I wake up free. And freedom, I've learned, doesn't require square footage. It just requires honesty. The Dwart Creative Arts Grant officially launched 3 months ago. Clara helped me set it up, and Miriam made sure every legal detail was airtight. We started small, just 5 scholarships for young artists in the San Diego area who couldn't afford instruments or lessons or supplies. I didn't attach my name to it prominently. I didn't want fanfare. I just wanted to help kids who had talent but no one to believe in them. The first recipient was a 14-year-old girl named Maya who wanted to learn violin but whose family couldn't afford the instrument or the lessons. I met her at the community center where we distributed the grants. She was shy, barely made eye contact, but when I handed her the certificate and told her we'd be covering her lessons for the next 2 years, her eyes filled with tears. "Really?" she whispered. "Really?" I said. She hugged me then, this tiny, fierce hug that nearly knocked me over. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Purpose. Not the kind that comes from being needed, but the kind that comes from choosing to give freely, without expectation, without strings, without needing anything in return. That night, I went home and cried, not sad tears, grateful ones, because I realized this is what Marcus and Lucas and Sophia could have had, Not my house, not my money, but this. The joy of giving without grasping. The peace of loving without manipulating. The richness of building something real instead of scheming for something hollow. But they chose differently. And I've stopped carrying the weight of their choices. I ran into an old colleague last week, Patricia, a cellist I used to perform with decades ago. We hadn't spoken in years, but she recognized me at the farmer's market and rushed over with that breathless excitement people get when they think they've found a piece of their past. "Elaine! My God, I thought you'd moved away. Someone told me you sold the La Jolla house." I smiled. I did. Her face fell, concerned. "Oh, no. Did you have to? Financial troubles?" "No," I said, realizing how good it felt to say it out loud. "I chose to. I needed a fresh start." She looked confused, like the idea of an 80-year-old woman choosing to uproot her life didn't compute. But then she nodded slowly, and I saw understanding dawn in her eyes. "Good for you," she said quietly. "I wish I'd had your courage." We exchanged numbers, and she invited me to a small ensemble performance next month. Nothing formal, just a group of retired musicians playing for the love of it. I said yes immediately, because that's the other thing I've learned. Saying yes to the right things is just as important as saying no to the wrong ones. And music, real music made with people who love it, that's always a yes for me. Dorothy from my painting class told me something last week that I haven't been able to stop thinking about. We were cleaning brushes after class when she said, "You know, Elaine, you saved my life." I looked up, startled. "That's a bit dramatic, don't you think?" She shook her head. "No, I mean it. Before I started coming here, I woke up every day and couldn't find a reason to get out of bed. My kids don't call. My husband's gone. I felt invisible. But then I started painting again, and I remembered. I'm not just someone's mother or someone's wife. I'm Dorothy, and Dorothy likes to paint." Her voice cracked. "You gave me that back." I didn't know what to say, so I just hugged her. Because sometimes that's enough. But later, driving home, I thought about what she said, about how we lose ourselves in the roles other people assign us. Mother, wife, grandmother, caretaker, provider. We become so good at playing those parts that we forget there's a person underneath, a person with dreams and talents and desires that have nothing to do with anyone else's needs. And when those roles are taken from us, or when we're discarded from them, we feel lost because we forgot who we were before the casting call. That's what happened to me. I became so good at being Marcus's mother, Lucas's grandmother, Sophia's accommodating mother-in-law that I forgot I was Elaine, pianist, painter, woman, person. But I remember now, and I'm teaching others to remember too. Milos and I took a trip to the botanical gardens yesterday. We packed sandwiches and spent the afternoon wandering through the orchid pavilion and the Japanese garden. He's 83, moves slower than he used to, but his mind is sharp as ever, and his laugh still sounds like mischief. We sat on a bench under a cherry tree, watching people pass by, and he said something that stuck with me. "You know what I regret most?" he asked. "Not the mistakes I made, not the opportunities I missed, but the years I spent trying to make people happy who were determined to be miserable anyway." I looked at him. "Who?" "My daughter," he said simply. "I gave her everything. Paid for her education, her wedding, her house. Bailed her out of debt 3 times. And you know what she says now? That I wasn't there for her. That I was too focused on my career to be a real father." He laughed, but it was sad. Maybe she's right. Maybe I wasn't perfect, but I tried. God, I tried. And it's never going to be enough. So I stopped trying. "Do you talk to her?" I asked. "Occasionally, birthdays, holidays. But it's cordial now. Surface. I don't chase her love anymore. I don't explain myself. I just exist, and she can take it or leave it." He turned to me. "And you know what? I sleep better now." I understood exactly what he meant, because I sleep better now too, without the weight of their expectations, without the fear of disappointing them, without the constant low-grade anxiety of wondering when the next request will come. I sleep deeply, peacefully, freely, and that's worth more than any relationship built on obligation. I've started writing again. Not music, though I still play, but actual writing. Poetry, mostly. Little observations about light and age and resilience. I don't know if it's any good, and I don't particularly care. I write because it helps me process, because it gives shape to feelings I didn't know I had, because it's mine. Last week, I wrote a poem about hands, about how mine used to fly across piano keys, and now they move more slowly, more deliberately, but with more intention. About how Hector's hands used to cover mine when I played, guiding me gently through difficult passages. About how Marcus's hands were small once, and I held them crossing streets and walking into dark rooms. About how those same hands, grown now, were ready to take everything from me without hesitation. I don't know if I'll ever share it with anyone, but I wrote it, and that's enough. There's something powerful about creating for yourself without needing anyone's approval or validation. I spent so much of my life performing for audiences, seeking applause, measuring my worth by the response I received. But now I create in silence, and the silence doesn't feel empty anymore. It feels full. A funny thing happened last month. I got a call from a lawyer representing Marcus. Not Miriam, thank God, but some attorney from his theater company. He wanted to know if I'd be willing to discuss a possible reconciliation and resolution regarding family assets. I almost laughed. I told him I had nothing to discuss, that my estate was settled and private, and that any further contact should go through my attorney. He tried the friendly approach. Mrs. Dwart, I understand there may have been some miscommunication within the family. I'm sure if we all sat down together— No, I said. Simple. Final. He sputtered a bit, then said, Marcus was hoping I'd at least consider hearing him out. He's very sorry about whatever transpired. Whatever transpired, as if accidentally overhearing my own son plotting to steal my home and lock me away, was just a little misunderstanding, a simple miscommunication. I told the lawyer I'd received Lucas's letter, that I appreciated it, but that my decision stood. Then I hung up, and I felt nothing, not anger, not satisfaction, just relief, because every boundary you enforce gets easier. Every no you say strengthens the next one, and every time you choose yourself, you remember why you're worth choosing. I celebrated my 81st birthday last week, not with Marcus or Lucas or Sophia, obviously, but with my chosen family, Clara, Miriam, Milos, Dorothy, and a few other women from my painting class. We had dinner at a small Italian restaurant downtown, nothing fancy, just good food and better company. They gave me gifts, practical ones, sweet ones, a new set of watercolors, a book of poetry, a soft shawl for cool mornings. But the best gift came from Maya, the young violinist from the scholarship program. She played for us, right there in the restaurant, with permission from the owner. She played Clair de Lune, which I'd mentioned was my favorite piece. Her technique wasn't perfect. Her bow wavered in a few places, but she played with her whole heart. And when she finished, there wasn't a dry eye at the table. Afterward, she hugged me and whispered, "Thank you for seeing me." I hugged her back. "Thank you for letting me." That's the difference, isn't it? Between real connection and transactional relationships. Real connection is mutual. It's seeing and being seen. It's giving and receiving without keeping score. It's choosing each other over and over because you want to, not because you have to. Marcus never saw me. He saw a resource. Lucas never saw me. He saw an easy mark. Sophia never saw me. She saw an obstacle. But Maya sees me, and Dorothy sees me, and Milos sees me. And that is family. The other day, I was playing piano at the senior center, and a man I'd never met before sat down in the front row. He was probably in his 70s, neatly dressed, with kind eyes. When I finished, he approached me. "That was beautiful," he said. "You play like someone who's lived a full life." I smiled. "I have." Good and bad? He asked. Both, I said. Plenty of both. He nodded. Me too. My wife passed 2 years ago. My son doesn't speak to me. Something about money and inheritance. I still don't fully understand it, but I've learned to be okay with not understanding. Some people just want what they want, and there's nothing you can do to change that. I felt a kinship with this stranger. I'm sorry about your son. He shrugged. I was too for a long time. But then I realized I can't make someone love me. I can only love myself enough to stop chasing people who don't want to be caught. We talked for a while after that. He told me about his wife, his life, his unexpected joy in learning to cook for himself at 75. I told him about my painting, my scholarship fund, my new life in a small apartment by the sea. Before he left, he said, "You know what's funny? I spent most of my life afraid of being alone. But now that I am, I've realized I was more alone when I was surrounded by people who didn't really see me." I watched him walk away, and I thought, yes, exactly. That's exactly it. Loneliness isn't about being alone. It's about being unseen. And I'm not lonely anymore, because I see myself now, clearly, honestly, completely, and that changes everything. If this story touched something inside you, a memory, a truth, a wound you thought had healed, you're not alone. So many of us spend years giving and hoping, only to discover we were written out of the story we helped build. Have you ever overheard the truth? Not in words meant for you, but in the silences people thought you couldn't hear? Tell me in the comments. Was there a moment you realized the love you gave wasn't returned the way you thought? Your story matters. Your voice deserves to be heard, not just in the background, but center stage. And if you're still carrying the weight of someone else's script, maybe it's time to write your own. Because the curtain doesn't have to close when they say so. It closes when you choose. And that choice, that's the most powerful line you'll ever deliver.